My name is Ethan George Hatcher, and I'm a Watchtower Corporation orphan. Although I had a mother to raise me, I never really had a mother to raise me at all. Merely a conduit and puppet of a much larger, much more sinister religious scheme. This may be confusing to the outside speculator, but to those who are all too familiar with the damage that Watchtower Corporation inflicts, the situation that I intend to describe will be innately familiar and understandable. Children need love. They soak up affection like tiny little sponges. Many studies have repeatedly demonstrated the immense benefit that children receive when they truly feel happy and secure and loved by their parents. However, being the only child of a Jehovah's Witness mother, I never received such love. It is my theory that the reason for this is due to the prolonged psychological indoctrination that members of Jehovah's Witnesses are exposed to, and I intend to describe to the viewer the three pressures which Jehovah's Witnesses undergo that leaves their psyche susceptible for subliminal suggestion and manipulation. Now, in order to avoid sounding melodramatic and also to put the viewer's mind at ease, I can honestly tell you that not every child of Jehovah's Witness parents will go unloved. There are exceptions to every rule. However, I cannot overstate that the mentality which Watchtower Corporation doctrine promotes is an inherently damaging one. This theology preys upon the weak-spirited. It preys upon the mentally unstable. It preys upon the gullible. It preys upon the naive, and it turns these victims into agents of destruction. And in turn, these agents will unfailingly attempt to pass these characteristics onto their unsuspecting and vulnerable offspring. To the outside world, Jehovah's Witnesses can appear to be normal and happy. And if you're watching this video right now and still believe this to be the case, I can patently tell you that this is not so, not true in the slightest. And although I myself am merely an ordinary individual, it is my hope that I will be able to adequately convey to you just how damaging this corporate religious hybrid is to children. However, if this is to be done thoroughly, you must first be made to understand the mentality, the thoughts, and the behaviors held by the adult members of this institution. While the physical landscape maintained by the members of Watchtower Corporation religious operations may in some ways appear idyllic, this is a carefully maintained illusion that is mandated by the mental controls cunningly implanted within the theology. This outward appearance of happiness is one of the major selling points that Watchtower Corporation highlights in order to appeal to the general public. That's you. The corporation is nobody's fool. They very well understand that in order for their message to sell to the public at large, it must be carefully packaged. There's a famous saying that goes something like this: if something appears to be too good to be true, then it most likely is. And in the case of Jehovah's Witnesses' visage of joy, this most certainly is the case. What lies behind the painted smiles of Jehovah's Witnesses is something far more disturbing than could be conceived. Recall that I mentioned I would describe three pressures Watchtower Corporation subversively exposes their followers to. The first and most prominent pressure is a psychological one. The literature regularly produced and distributed to ground-level members reinforces a specific guideline of dress, grooming, and behavior. This is called putting on the new personality. It is important in any brainwashing technique that the individual identity be replaced with a cult identity. These teachings have a twofold benefit to the corporation. Firstly, it helps create positive imagery for the public to associate with Jehovah's Witnesses. And secondly, it aids the religious authorities appointed by the corporation to expediently identify members who may be straying from the corporate guidelines. These individuals will be casually approached by the religious authorities and politely instructed to subdue their expression of individuality and reincorporate themselves into the flock. Over an extended period of time, this will become acceptable and even normal to the average Jehovah's Witness. Watchtower Corporation goes beyond installing a few religious authorities, however. More insidiously, they foster a police state mentality in the minds of individuals. Nobody can truly trust one another. Members are routinely instructed to report their family and friends to the appointed religious authorities should they step beyond the bounds sorry about that, which the corporation defines. The penalty for failing to do this is the same as the offender who stepped beyond the boundaries to begin with. Thusly, one cannot speak freely about any misgivings, even to fellow members, for fear that they are to be reported. This is a form of mental isolation which diminishes confidence and self-worth, and therefore makes these poor souls submissive and subservient to the corporate doctrine. Isolation is a very powerful tool of manipulation, and cannot be underestimated. Human rights activists will often compare this isolation with torture, and it most certainly is a form of torture that Watchtower Corporation seeks to exploit. Members are trained to be exclusively loyal to the society or to the organization, and this includes loyalty over any single person or ideal. At this stage in our discussion, you can begin to see how the various psychological conditionings affect and connect with each other. Since members are trained to unflinchingly follow Watchtower Corporation, they're psychologically distant from even their fellow members. Watchtower Corporation can dictate at any time and for any reason that your family members are to be cut off from human contact in a process known as disfellowshipping. This sword of Damocles, this persistent and enduring threat held over the heads of the faithful, begins to color the mindset of Jehovah's Witnesses collectively. Subconsciously, each one must condition themselves to be able to drop years-long acquaintances, family, friends, anyone who ever knew or loved them on some level, at the behest of the homogeneous collective of Watchtower Corporation. This constant internal struggle leads to emotionally distant friendships that leave social animals like humans feeling depressed and unfulfilled. Absent of emotional fulfillment and berated by depression, anger and resentment can begin to fester. This leads into another mentally brutalizing reality confronting Jehovah's Witnesses: the competition for affection. All witnesses mutually look to Watchtower Corporation as the source for unfailing religious truths in a world that they believe is out to persecute them. Personal affirmations of faith, and thusly the release of stress-relieving endorphins, are triggered through the praise given by religious authority figures. So as Jehovah's Witnesses train their minds to create positive physiological responses to psychological stimuli, they begin to form conditioned desires and become addicts, constantly trying to trick their brain into releasing those feel-good chemicals by seeking the approval of Watchtower Corporation. The way in which a low-level member is taught that they express their spirituality is by pursuing privileges in the congregation. Individuals who do not pursue these so-called privileges are categorized as weak and unspiritual. This sets the staging ground for the social warfare and fierce competition for praise by the religious authorities in each congregation. Since value is associated with scarcity, such privileges are limited in number, thus elevating the status received when attaining such positions. And many positions are virtually a revolving door filled with members who cyclically fall in and out of praise with Watchtower Corporation. Obviously, it is not my intention to bore the viewer, so although I could go on to describe many more grueling aspects of the psychological pressure Jehovah's Witnesses are subjected to, it is sufficient that you are provided a small glimpse of the horror. Now we move on to the secondary pressure Jehovah's Witnesses are subjected to: the physical pressure each member suffers. Simply put, physically, most Jehovah's Witnesses are exhausted. During their frequent gatherings, an oft-spoken catchline phrase is not Satan's wicked world tiring us out, brothers and sisters? Do not let this wicked world allow us to become tired. So even when at a point of sheer exhaustion, the Jehovah's Witness will suffer through it, muddle on, believing that his efforts will ultimately be rewarded by a higher power. But the carrot-on-a-stick lure of Watchtower Corporation is only a symptom of Jehovah's Witness exhaustion. The real problem is far more compounded. The domino effect of problems stacked upon each other in a cacophony of cataclysmic proportion is manifest no better place than in the series of intertwining factors that doom the Jehovah's Witness to perpetual tiredness. In order to maximize the effect of indoctrination, Watchtower Corporation tries to start young, Hitler Youth style. Education is vilified and ignorance is praised. Slavery is freedom, war is peace, etc. Read 1984 if you haven't already. So all through the youngster's school years, he will become increasingly less able to progress academically and also be scorned by his classmates for his strange beliefs. Now, of course, all of this is building up to an incredible mental strain. Remember from your biology class that humans burn through a lot of energy using that pink mush up in your head. So this mental strain begins to manifest itself with depression and all of its glorious physical side effects, such as inexplicable aches, lethargy, apathy, exhaustion, and so much more. By college age, the child will most likely be convinced that a high school education is all he'll need in this time of the end, a term that Watchtower Corporation uses to remind its members that Armageddon is going to be around the corner at any moment. Now, all generations of Jehovah's Witness youth have been negatively affected by the Watchtower Corporation position of anti-education, but possibly none more than the children of the 90s. I don't think that I need to explain to anyone that we Americans are finding ourselves in a recession. Employment is difficult to find even for those with college degrees, but especially for those lacking the credit of higher education. Now, the children promised by Watchtower Corporation that they wouldn't need a college degree because the end was near are now finding that their pockets are empty, their cupboards are bare, and Watchtower Corporation doesn't even whisper an apology. As difficult as it is to imagine, I believe that this is no accident. While it may be coincidental that the recession is arousing suspicion of Watchtower's prophetic credibility, overall this policy of shunning higher education and keeping members physically strained has benefited the corporation from a business standpoint. Think about it. Since members of the corporation don't spend their time on education, they instead spend their time serving the interests of the corporation. For a business, this is phenomenal. Imagine having the benefit of distributing free advertisements internationally. Even if your product was terrible, you'd at least be able to find a few people willing to buy it, and it's this demographic that Watchtower Corporation caters to. The average time a Jehovah's Witness spends in this so-called ministry work, translation, free advertising campaign for Watchtower Corporation, is around 10.5 hours per month. This may seem insignificant, but those 10.5 hours are completely unpaid. In addition to this, travel time and preparation are not included in the figure. Also unincluded in the figure are the time Jehovah's Witnesses spend attending their congregational gatherings throughout the year. So the amount of time Jehovah's Witnesses spend in service to Watchtower Corporation is exceedingly higher than a mere 10.5 hours per month. In order to illustrate this clearly, let's do a quick chart, shall we? On a weekly basis, a single Jehovah's Witness will spend 1.5 hours dressing and undressing for congregational meetings, 4.0 hours sitting at the meetings, 1 hour talking with members before and after the meetings, 1.5 hours traveling to and from the meetings, 2 hours studying for Watchtower publications for the meetings, 1 hour studying for the 1 hour for the family study session, 1.5 hours doing personal study of Watchtower publications, 1 hour studying the Bible, 2.5 hours spent in the field service for Watchtower Corporation, 1 hour for miscellaneous Watchtower-related activities. So the total is 16 hours per week, 64 hours per month, and a grand total for the year of 832 hours. I arrived at this figure using rough approximations and minimum amounts of time for each activity. The real number for Jehovah's Witnesses could be far higher or far lower depending on individual habits and standing in the congregation. Even so, this number means that the average Jehovah's Witness will spend 1/10 of their life in total dedication to a man-made corporation. Hopefully this illustrates a point and also explains why Jehovah's Witnesses lifelessly shuffle through their existence. Remember how I earlier noted that the problems besetting Jehovah's Witnesses are compound in nature? Hopefully now you'll better understand. Since Jehovah's Witnesses are denied higher education, they are then forced to settle for more physically consuming day labor jobs. Watchtower Corporation is meant to take precedent over every aspect of the member's life. And so these already physically demanding jobs may become more demanding when the Jehovah's Witness is forced to work off hours in order to keep Watchtower Corporation taking first place in their life. In order to facilitate these series of lifestyle compromises, Jehovah's Witnesses will begin to sacrifice recreational and personal time. They believe that this pleases God, but somehow it manages to benefit Watchtower Corporation along the way as well. As a businessman, isn't the goal to keep one's customer base? For Watchtower Corporation, their customer base is the members. You won't then be surprised to hear that this behavior is routinely praised by the religious authorities. It is meant to, and often does, instill a deep sense of satisfaction within the individual member. So the mind exposed to this physical and mental strain will gradually become conditioned to accept this unusual lifestyle as normal and even praiseworthy. For example, a similar state of mind is held by long-time domestic abuse victims who can, through patient conditioning, feel that the abuse is reasonable or even deserved. As a former abuse victim of Watchtower Corporation theology, I can personally attest that at one time this line of thinking gripped my mind and tormented my existence. Thus, since Jehovah's Witnesses are conveniently kept in a perpetual state of exhaustion encouraged by Watchtower Corporation, they won't have the presence of mind to understand just how woeful and degrading their existence is. In the meantime, their bodies and minds gradually become walking husks of human beings functioning on programmed behavior. This now brings me to my third and final pressure that Jehovah's Witnesses are exposed to, the financial pressure.